Fun fact, the creator of Tetris hates today's subject matter.
Everybody want to do 3D Tetris, and it was a version of 3D Tetris called BlockOut, and I really hate it.
And yeah, I'm inclined to agree with them. Once upon a time, there was a game called Tetris. You may have heard of this game because they made a movie about it. Anyway, once Tetris got popular, there was demand for a 3D version of Tetris. Or was there? I don't know. People were still fighting over the rights to regular Tetris at the time, what with car chases and shit like that. And then in 1989, a Polish developer under the name of California Dreams, no relation to the sitcom of the same name, decided to take a shot at 3D Tetris in the form of their hit game, BlockOut. BlockOut first graced MS-DOS before migrating over to a number of other platforms, including various computer systems, Sega Genesis, Atari Lynx. There was even an arcade game. Then BlockOut fell off the face of the earth until 2007-ish, when someone made BlockOut 2, which was just BlockOut, but for more modern computer systems of the time running Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and whatever. You could play that one if you want, it's free, but we're playing the OG DOS version today because, well, we did Weltris last week, we might as well do BlockOut and just debate the war of the 3D Tetris or whatever, I don't know. In BlockOut, you have a four-sided well on display, where blocks of various shapes and sizes fall from the top to make its way over to the bottom. Much like in Tetris, your main goal is to fill a flat layer with stuff so that it eventually clears from the board. Think of it as forming lines in 2D Tetris. You can rotate your piece with various keys depending on the axes, and also hard drop the piece to the bottom of the well with the space bar. You keep playing until you eventually top out, obviously. BlockOut has a variety of customization options for you to play with, including the size of the well as well as the type of blocks that fall, whether you want flat 2D pieces more akin to Tetris pieces, basic 3D pieces, or the extended option which is more advanced pieces for those who absolutely hate life. So, as you could probably surmise from my choice of words and also the opening intro, I am not a fan of BlockOut. I do not hate it as much as Tetris creator Alexei Pajitnov claims to hate it in that clip we saw in the beginning, but I certainly didn't enjoy playing it. BlockOut gave me a headache trying to play after a couple sessions, and honestly, it's a needless convolution of a basic concept. I mean, you take Tetris, this nice, simple, straightforward, yet still immensely involved falling block puzzler, and you shift the perspective to a bird's eye view of the bottom of the proverbial barrel, as it were, and now blocks can move across all three-dimensional axes. Well, there you go. Have fun fumbling with the keyboard trying to remember which key rotates a piece on which axis. Enjoy having no visual cue as to whether you have holes underneath the layer you're forming, or not being certain as to where your piece might land despite the presence of a handy-dandy grid to help you out. And then try to do the same thing but with these awkward-looking 3D pieces that are excessively difficult to fully grasp and manipulate into something useful for your purposes, such as it is. There is a lot more thought process and effort in trying to play BlockOut, especially with the more advanced options on hand, compared to something like Tetris, which kept things simple to a point where you eventually stop thinking about your moves and just start feeling them and going with them. You enter a zone where you're mostly reacting to things as best as possible, and it almost becomes instinctive. It's something that any good puzzler will instill in the player after playing a few sessions. Whereas with BlockOut, you never really reach that point because after a while, it simply becomes too much information for the brain to process and you just short out. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible because that's being silly, and I'm sure some people could play this and eventually find that zone here, but again, I just find it to be a needlessly convoluted take on something that just kept it simple and worked to a point where it's still around today, whereas BlockOut, well, never mind. For what it's worth, BlockOut's presentation is simple, straightforward, and fairly easy to understand on paper at least. Falling pieces are depicted in wireframe before solidifying on the ground, different layers of stuff is represented with different colors, and you even have a meter on the side to tell you how high the stack is. There's no indication as to which holes you've left behind once it's been covered up by another piece above, which is the only real glaring quibble I have with the visual aspect, but other than that, everything is communicated and presented in a clean and understandable enough format. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done, at least. And as far as sound is concerned, Well, it's 1989, which means no music and a handful of irritating PC speaker noises to either serenade or torture your auditory senses. And even on that front, it's not a whole lot. It's mostly whenever you go up a level or you clear a lair or whatever the case may be, so it's not that big of a deal either way. Overall, well, I'm afraid I have to agree with Mr. Tetris himself. I do not like BlockOut. Starts off simple enough, but once you eventually get your stack high, you have more holes in your layers, it gets to be a hassle to put up with. And after a while, I just got bored, I turned the game off and I went to bed. Not a game I would advise anyone sample because it's just too much of a headache to play, and frankly, anything involving Tetris or that style works best in its standard 2D format. But if you really want to give BlockOut a shot, there's that BlockOut 2 game for Windows that you could get for free. You could look it up online somewhere. It's practically the same thing, but honestly, it's not really worth it. Just stick with the one that works because it kept it simple, stupid.